people, rounding them up in the jungle. The original reports were all 408 dead, and then 700 flee into the woods. And the military said, first, the Guyanese can't count. Second, that it was bodies on top of bodies, though how you start with 408 and end up with 915 and say that the 400 covered the 500 makes no sense. They said bodies in little piles. They even said at the end, after they'd been there for 6 days, that they forgot to go around to the back of the pavilion and there were 500 bodies back there. I mean, this was the final official explanation, but these people were being killed. Yes, smaller in this room.
There's an old junkie from Detroit who was a survivor of Jonestown. The guy said he hid under the...
Odell Rhodes?
Yeah, maybe his name. What happened to him? Where is he now?
I don't know where all the survivors are. Many of them survived because they cooperated with the plan and were meant to survive. That's the case with the basketball team and other people.
They were off somewhere.
Well, they eventually got to Georgetown and eventually came back to the United States. Some of them were out on a ship. The ones that were on the boat with Blakey went to Trinidad. Then they went to Panama and emptied a $5 million bank account in Credit Suisse. And then they went to Grenada. They set up shop in Grenada, I believe in the mental hospital there, with Dr. Bourne and his father, who worked in primate research with MKUltra. And Bourne set up all the methadone programs in the United States for the Rockefellers. And I think they were experimenting on the mental patients because that's the only building bombed in the invasion of Grenada. And there's 180 people in the inmates in the psychiatric institution murdered, dumped into a mass grave, and then the U.S. was going to send $400 million to rebuild the hospital. I mean, they were going to make it a better unit to experiment on people after they got the right government in.
Early on, a cocaine smuggling operation, because I believe...
There were drugs and guns being smuggled in and out, and there were relations of mercenaries. Some of these killers that were taken in and out of Angola, the CIA-backed UNITA forces by Blakey, Iran mercenaries, and they did run guns and drugs, but the operation was primarily an extension of MKUltra. People were taken off the streets here in San Francisco, out of the welfare rolls, from the elderly homes, from the psychiatric institutions, from the prisons. Children were given as wards of the court and turned over into their control. They put them in buses. They took them to Miami, and I talked to an air traffic controller when they landed in Guyana. All of the blacks were bound and gagged coming off of the plane. People 5 miles away didn't even know there were blacks at Jonestown. All they had ever seen of People's Temple were the white crew that was running it, going in and out of the cities. They were buying Guyanese babies from women wherever they could give a blanket or something for a baby and taking them back in there, and there was massive experimentation. There were enough drugs on site to drug the population of Georgetown, Guyana, over 120,000 for more than a year for a population of 1,200 people in this camp. And Dr. Schacht, who I believe survived, he's not in the first death list. He's added to the second. I think he's related to Hjalmar Schacht, the Mike Reich's Minister of Finance, who developed the phrase "Arbeit macht frei," work makes you free, at the Auschwitz camp. And they came to Houston. That's where the Schacht family ended up. They were the big bankers for Hitler. And this guy is from Houston, and he was not a doctor. He was described as doing, suturing on wounds without anesthesia and all kind of sadistic things. And they had medical tags. You can see even in Time magazine medical tags on the people. But an order came down from Zbigniew Brzezinski through Hague to Robert Pastor on site to strip bodies of all identification and tags. Then the bodies are left in the sun to rot so that no fingerprints, no identification can be done from the tags, and no autopsy can be done, fluid or otherwise, by the time they get back to the United States. So you can never find out what killed them or how many drugs they had in the body. They had one footlocker there with 11,000 doses of Thorazine. And the drugs that are described are the exact drugs that were used for 30 years in MKUltra in the different control scenarios.
With a past that's littered with so many shattered lives and a trail of mental torture, the challenge of the new millennium will be learning how to best protect ourselves from mind control.
Somehow, the average citizen thinks that his or her mind could never be manipulated, and yet every day we're manipulated by each other, we're manipulated by advertising. 1,000 things impact and manipulate us in different ways.
we're bombarded with messages from the media, the radio, the television, and from newspapers that shape our perceptions of the world.
This relentless yet subtle conditioning can develop without you even knowing it.
Watching television is a trance-like experience. You forget about the carpet, the curtains, and that you're sitting in a room, and you engage your experience directly into the television screen, so that whatever happens on the screen seems really real. You suspend belief in reality. If you don't take responsibility for what goes into your mind, somebody else will. Cult leaders, politicians, advertisers will all seek to implant their message in your mind, whether it's for your good or not.
The greatest battle of the 21st century will be a battle of the mind. And there are people who have power who want more power, and they do not want the public to know about mind control, its existence, or how it's implemented.
There is a body of information being used by government to control the way people think and act, and experiments are systematically designed to increase government's knowledge about that. This is the most threatening part of being a citizen in a democracy. When your government can manipulate how you vote and how you think, you no longer live in a democracy.
Well, you know that it's going to be alright. I think it's gonna be alright. Everything will always be alright when we go shopping.
What advertising has always wanted to do is not simply to suffuse the atmosphere, but to become the atmosphere. It wants us not to be able to find a way outside of the world that it creates for us.
It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind.
That goes straight back in American history. You read the working class press in the mid-19th century, press published by artisans and what were called factory girls, young women from the farms working in the textile mills in eastern Massachusetts, which was the center of beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Their press was calling for, they said their theme was that those who work in the mills ought to own them. Wage labor, which was called wage slavery, was regarded by most Americans as not very different from slavery. Even the Republican Party regarded wage labor as just at best a preliminary to free labor, but intolerable because it's a kind of servitude. A large part of the northern population fighting the Civil War was fighting under that banner.
Last fall, while some people went shopping for new sweaters, the people of Peterborough went shopping for a new energy company.
Deregulation is giving the people the ability to choose.
I think that the town made a really good choice.
With Enron, we've seen energy rates cut between 15 and 18%.
You don't even know that there's a difference until you get your bill.
Nobody likes a monopoly, particularly in a place where the state motto is live free or die.
You can choose your neighbors, and soon you may choose your energy company. Enron.
I know I need to listen.
No one has imported the techniques and philosophy of market research into politics more successfully than Frank Luntz. His clients have been some of the most prominent Republican politicians of the last decade. There was the mayoral campaign for Rudolph Giuliani in 1993, his work for Silvio Berlusconi in Italy, and especially his collaboration with Newt Gingrich on the famous Contract with America, the document that ushered in the Republican Revolution in Congress.
If an electricity company stood up and said, we want to do it for your benefit, we want to do it for our benefit, we want to do it for everyone's benefit, and so we have a better approach.
Tonight, Luntz's client is not a candidate, but a Florida utility wanting to build public support for a change in how it's regulated on the environment.
I know